Hey, so before we get started with the actual video, this is just going to be me ranting for however long about 10 Chambers and as a development team and just the game as a whole. I'm going to try and say everything that I have on my mind, so it's going to be very, very long because I have extremely negative opinions about many, many different aspects of this game and as 10 Chambers as a whole. This is not going to be a pretty video to watch. There is very little, if anything, positive at all that I have to say, and this is just basically my my goodbye. This is me explaining why I'm leaving the community and why I do not believe 10 Chambers deserves the community that they have. And because of that, there are numerous occasions in this video where I am blatantly and unapologetically rude to the game and to the developers. I've re-recorded many different parts of this video, but there's still some sections that I left in as just me being blatantly rude because I feel like it got my point across better. That being said, this still is an extremely long video, and if you don't have time to watch the whole thing or you just don't care to, whatever it may be, the TLDR version is that 10 Chambers is a company that historically sends legal threats to people that mod their game, mistreat their community, knowingly and willfully lie to their community, refuse to communicate to their community. They're a professional game development company that is outdone by a small group of modders. They put little to no effort into content and gameplay updates. They put little to no effort into game and balance changes. They put little effort into bug fixing. They've created an entire development framework that actively hinders the way they make the game, and they have no sense of direction in terms of player retention. I'll be picking each of these points apart and explaining my reasoning behind them in detail. So like I said, this isn't going to be a pretty video to watch, and it's going to be very long. I can ignore the lack of updates. I can ignore the lazy development. I can ignore the lack of communication. But when it's all of that combined and more, and they're just general assholes to their community at large, it becomes very difficult to want to support 10 Chambers as a company and by extension GTFO as a game. This is coming from the perspective of somebody with 1,300 hours in the game. Someone who was in Bug Hunt from R5 Extended up to the release of R6, and someone who enjoyed the game enough to create a YouTube channel off of it. I hope you guys are able to understand where I'm coming from, and with all of that being said, let's go and get started. So some of you may already know what this is, whether just you were around for it or you watched Black Dragon's recent video he put out, but this is about community purity. So back in Rundown 2 and 3, modding in this game was starting to actually pick up, and it wasn't something that the devs liked very much for whatever reason. So these modding communities were very close-knit and almost like an underground kind of thing. They would really only let you in and give you access to some of the mods if they knew you and they trusted you. And some members of the Discord moderation, including Doc Red, would make alt accounts or try and get people that were within these circles to try and, turn in their friends, for lack of a better term. And essentially the moderation team would go in and they would get names of people so they could ban them and basically just destroy the modding communities that people were trying to start. I'm going to have both these linked in the description, but there are 2 Reddit posts made on the GTFO subreddit about community purity, because thankfully that subreddit is not actually run by 10 Chambers, where one of the people, Ray a lot, had received EULA and legal threats from Doc Red within his Discord DMs for quote-unquote providing players unauthorized access to GTFO expeditions. And this isn't a one-off occurrence. There's another community purity post as well, and I assume he also did this to numerous other players' DMs. But he just goes in and starts to accuse people of modding, ask them to sell their friends, ask them how they're doing, ask them where they're getting the mods, so he can go in and attempt to ban those involved and shut down the modding community as a whole. And as I said previously, he even goes so far as to threaten legal action against people for this shit. I'll leave both the community purity posts in the description. I encourage you to actually go read them over to get full context and to form your own opinion on it. As it stands, this whole situation is fucking stupid and should never have happened. And this whole thing is even worse once you realize that at the time Doc Red was the community manager and he is being paid to do this. This is his actual profession. He's supposed to manage the GTFO community, and instead he's going into people's DMs, people that enjoy the game and are passionate enough to try and create their own content for the game and spend time creating stuff on their free time, because they enjoy the game that much. He's going into their DMs and threatening legal action because they would dare attempt such a thing. And a lot of this could just be Doc Red being Doc Red, because if you talk to any veteran player, you'll notice that he doesn't really have the greatest reputation amongst them for some reason. But at the same time, he was immediately hired full-time and was flown out to Sweden to go work for 10 Chambers immediately following the events of this. So it makes you wonder if they either were telling him to do it or if they care at all that he even did that. But it's not like 10 Chambers wasn't aware of this when they hired him. Ludwig, who is one of the founders of 10 Chambers, is, in some of the earliest messages of the modding server telling people to stop hating on Doc Red so much. So clearly this isn't all him. It had to have been facilitated or at least supported by 10 Chambers to some degree, which within itself is just fucking stupid. It's like Dragon says in his own video, they literally shot themselves in the foot. They took a bunch of people that enjoyed their game, and then they just told them all to fuck off. The other problem is that the modding server wasn't even just given out freely. The people that wanted to make it actually had to go and fight 10 Chambers over it. And I think Ray a lot puts it really well here when he says, "From my perspective, it's essentially a number of underground communities coming together to stick their flag in the sand and carve out a space where modders wouldn't get witch hunted." This whole situation is again made even worse because the devs still don't support modding and they actively make it harder to mod every rundown. For Rundown 4 and onwards, they specifically changed code compilers from mono to IL2 CPP to make it so people that mod the game have less access to the source code. I'm not going to go into all the differences between the code compilers, but it's not like some reason where it's like, oh, well, it makes the game run better. Oh, we like coding on whatever this thing is more than we like coding on the other one. Because they literally have leaked versions that people in the modding Discord have gotten their hands on of mono builds of Rundown 5 and mono builds of Rundown 6. And there's not even an excuse, like it's colossally hard for them to change back because it's quite literally going to a drop-down menu within your project settings and changing it from mono to IL2 CPP. That's literally it. It's that and other dumb stuff like deliberately removing the names of the weapons and the descriptions of the weapons from the data blocks and just replacing them with random numbers. So the R5 data block, it says bullpup and has the description, but the R6 one, it just says public name and just a number, and the description is just a number. I had to deliberately go into the data blocks for R6 and comment what the actual name of the weapon was so I could find it easily. It's just dumb changes like these that serve no purpose for the actual developers other than to just annoy people that try and mod the game and just try and make it more difficult. They literally haven't changed since the days of community purity. The only thing that's different now is that we can do these things without the devs literally trying to crucify us. I don't know what kind of perverted delusion of reality the devs are living in where they think the people that want to play more of their game are the bad guys. And in that same vein, I don't understand the whole, well, the rundown is over, you can never play it again kind of mentality they have. It's one thing to say, like, yeah, we want to move forward with the game, we want to make other stuff, we don't want to focus on past stuff, that's whatever, that's understandable. But they still actively go out of their way to try and stop people from playing previous rundowns despite the fact that the modding server exists. They even force the people on the modding server to put in one of the rules that they don't permit playing older rundowns within the fucking modding server. And sometimes, just sometimes, you get banned by Cali for 8 years, 11 months, and 28 days because when somebody asks how to play an older rundown, you tell them to DM you. I'm not even upset that I got banned there because it's technically understandable because of the rules, but at the same time, like, at least be fucking consistent with your rulings. It says in there that I also got banned because my status was telling people, like, DM me if you want to play earlier rundowns, but that was my status for almost 2 goddamn months and not a single word was said about it, and I had multiple conversations with Callie during the time that was my status. And previously, I had also just responded with the exact same messages, just DM me whenever someone said, how do I play an earlier rundown? I even had the balls to do it under a fucking message from Doc Red. The only reason I'm actually upset that I got muted or banned or whatever in the first place is because it was immediately following the events of this Discord community post that Callie made. Pretty much the entire context behind this is that literally one morning the entire server was empty except for a group of 10 or 15 people that were just chilling in General 1 and they were playing R2E1. And basically they just started kicking people from voice chats and muting people because, you're not allowed to play modded rundowns. Even the people that weren't even playing it, because there was just 4 people playing it, there was only one lobby going. They're getting kicked, they're getting muted, they're doing whatever. So because we're annoyed, we're start changing our nicknames to. I changed mine to Imagine Being a Discord Mod. There's a couple people that changed theirs to like Looking for Modded Content and just like stupid stuff like that. You know, and in a fit of rage and an outrage, Callie joins the VC and just stays muted for like 15 or 20 minutes. And during this time, we thought it would be funny to just play modded, so we started loading up Fatal Experiment, and eventually it turns out that when my friend Nitro said the words Turbo Mother, him and my friend Jorgen were instantly banned for 3 days, and then Nuggies was in there as well, but Nuggies is playing fucking Rainbow Six, and then he also gets a warning from Callie, for playing Rainbow Six, apparently. It's not even that we got banned, which is the upsetting part. It's the reasoning and the logic behind it. Like, we're playing modded stuff, which isn't allowed, and that's whatever. But it's the whole inconsistent moderation thing, and also the whole, we're going to shoot first and ask questions later. Nuggies got a ban because he's playing a different game. He's not even involved in any of the shit that's going on, so that's already fucking stupid. And then my friend Nitro and my friend Jorgen get banned. Jorgen didn't fucking say anything, and Nitro gets banned for saying Turbo Mother. Callie doesn't even know we're playing GTFO. We could be playing literally any game on the planet, but, you know, because we're in the GTFO server, well, we have to be playing GTFO. And it's like the fourth person we were playing with didn't even get banned, and I got banned for something entirely separate. I got banned because I told someone to DM me to play an earlier rundown immediately following the events of this. And it's in that moment that Callie's like, yeah, we're going to act now. It's like, I've almost been doing that for 3 months and nothing gets done about it. But you're going to choose this specific moment in time to do something because I annoyed you. Like, be consistent with your moderation. It isn't hard. You very clearly knew I was breaking the rules ahead of time. You didn't say a single goddamn word until then. And then he has the gall to go and make an entire Discord community post calling us childish because we were mocking and changing our names for, like, the moderators. And it's like, you have the audacity to say that, then make an entire community post, and then say, well, DM me about this if you have any questions. Like, and we're the childish ones. All right, man. If you want to call us childish, how about you stop mocking people who level criticism at your game? How about that? That's a good start, Callie. Another good start would be actually providing the community with information that you said was going to be coming down the pipeline at some point. I mean, seriously, we're going on 3 months since you've made that post. The only thing is that we've gotten were a roadmap update, a disingenuous at best dev blog, which I'll be going over later, and then part 1 of a dev Q&A, while part 2 gets canceled and has no word of returning. And in regards to the dev Q&A, the entire thing was just a waste of time. It might as well have just been a giant PR stunt to try and generate more hype for the game. Seriously, the entire dev Q&A was literally, here's our thought process behind making GTFO, here's a bunch of questions on sound design, no, we will not be localizing any of the lore for the game, no, we do not have any continuity errors within our lore. And that was pretty much it. There was no substance to any of the Q&A, and it was one of the most disappointing dev Q&As I think I've ever watched for any game because nothing got answered. They basically took an hour out of their day and everybody else's day to just answer what 3 paragraphs on an About Me page could have done in like 30 seconds. You know, and then I look at something that the Risk of Rain 2 devs do. They do a dev Q&A and they also spend an hour on it, but they answer 20 to 25 questions and they cover a wide range of things from game balance to challenging development decisions to difficulty and scaling within the game, development prioritization, their plans for the future, plans for other titles, why some content is cut, why things don't make it into the game. And then they still also have time to answer questions regarding lore and stuff like, what is the most fun piece of content you've ever developed? And you know, it just leaves a really sour taste in my mouth when we get no news on anything ever, and when we finally get news on something, there's just almost no effort put into it. And it just makes me wonder why 10 Chambers even pays to have a community manager on staff if they don't do anything. Because the way I see it, there's basically one of 2 scenarios. They're such a disorganized and dysfunctional company that they can't pull together enough info to reliably give out news for their community, like not even on a semi-weekly or monthly basis. Or they just don't let Callie do stuff because they're so afraid for some reason of just letting their community have news and info about the development and just general path that the game is going down. And I'm honestly not sure which is worse. Like, you look at the dev blog for Stamina, and they're trying to be super coy and mysterious about it by not calling it Stamina, because it's not Stamina, it's anti-kiting measures, it's different, guys. It's like, they try so hard to obfuscate everything from their community, and for what? Like, I literally can't comprehend it. What is the problem with just saying, yes, we do not like kiting, we will be adding Stamina to fix it? Why is that so hard for them to do? Why can't they just not be honest with their fucking community? It becomes so difficult to try and understand what 10 Chambers is doing from both a game dev and from a community management perspective, because none of them talk to their community at all. There's only two people that talk to the community, and it's Doc Red and it's Callie. But the problem with that is that Callie isn't an actual game dev, so he doesn't answer any of the technical questions. He just leaves all of that to Doc Red. But Doc Red does a horrible job at it, because all Doc Red does is argue these stupid strawman arguments that nobody's even talking about to try and downplay the situation. I think this is probably one of the most egregious situations where verbatim Doc Red says, "What kind of game do you think it would be if we fulfilled the community's desires?" I'm not even going to linger on that because it's just not worth the time. If you need to pause it so you can rewind that in your head to make sure you heard it correctly, go ahead, because that's what I had to do when I first fucking read this. He then goes on to say, "It would be a weird game if you implemented everything that got the highest number of upvotes." Yes, Doc Red, that is correct. Not everything that gets upvoted should be in the fucking game. This is obvious. But when it's not something stupid like wanting to add a rocket launcher that directly contradicts the vision of the game, maybe it's something that could be worth considering. Like something like this. I've seen this exact idea suggested more times than I can count. I scrolled back 1 week and this is the highest upvoted suggestion within 1 week, then it has no downvotes. And the only reason I'm saying it has none is because the only person that downvoted it is the same insufferable loser that downvotes every single post. And since you guys are spending so much time trying to develop and flesh out the lore of this game that you've sextupled the amount of logs that are in this rundown compared to the previous ones, it doesn't really seem all that far-fetched for people to say, hey, can there be one centralized, congealed place where I can just read these? Or when he says stupid shit like not every bug would get fixed before release, so release would never happen. Yeah, no shit, you don't need to condescend to everyone in your community like they're fucking 4 years old. For context here, they're talking about sniper melee, so yes, Doc, I think major game-breaking bugs should get fixed before you push them to live. And in response to this dumbass's strawman rhetorical question, yes, I would rather you hotfix game-breaking bugs instead of working on the next update. I would rather have the game be in a playable, stable state before we get a next update. Sometimes Doc even goes on about things that he doesn't even understand. You can see here he talks about networking, and he says, if you ask any engineer, they'll tell you that networking sucks. Hi, I'm Kepri. I'm a certified network engineer. This is the scoring report for my Cisco ICND 2 exam, which is the part 2 of the CCNA test. You can see I've censored some info because it's in my best interest to not dox myself. When Doc Red says shit here, like networking issues are hard to fix because it can be anything from a packet being lost, coming out of order, or a network switch going haywire 1,000 kilometers away, or a network line being cut, he's being completely and utterly disingenuous to the highest degree. So when he says stuff like it can be anything from a packet being lost or coming out of order, there's this wonderful, beautiful, amazing protocol called TCP, which literally is designed to have specific checks and balances in place to stop packets from coming out of order and being lost. It can detect when a packet is lost, it can detect when a packet has come out of order. And I understand that games and netcode don't always use TCP because it's slower. You're right, they use a combination of UDP and TCP, but the difference here is that they have direct control over what specific types of packets they can send with what protocol. So when you have really, really stupid shit like some enemies are standing still and not moving while some enemies are moving, or you can just be running around and not taking any damage but still be able to deal damage, but you're not lagging out because everybody in the game can still see you running around and you can kill stuff and they can still see you damaging stuff and you're not desynced for anybody, you're just only not taking damage. Yes, Doc, these are networking things that are specifically within your control, along a numerous other list of things such as all of the checkpoint bugs, sniper melee's existence in general, things like Seafoam being desynced for client versus host, Seafoam not actually applying to doors sometimes if you're a client, enemies teleporting whenever they punch you, enemy tongues hitting you through walls even when they're not supposed to, taking damage from an enemy that's already previously died even if you and the host have both correctly identified that that enemy was dead before it licked you. The list just goes on of stupid fucking netcode things which should be fixed and should not exist. And then, in typical Doc Red fashion, he tries to downplay the entire situation with a strawman argument. When he talks about network switches going haywire 1,000 kilometers away or a network line being cut 500 miles away, this is the dumbest strawman I think I've ever seen him come up with. These are not things that you as a game dev need to ever deal with and come up with solutions for. These are problems that fall under the strict space of a CCNP, network engineer. These are things that are above my pay grade, and they sure as hell are above yours. These are things that even the world's greatest network engineers, the people that work for huge, massive AAA games, cannot get right because there's not a solution to it. If a network device fails, then it fails. There is a very stark difference between packet loss and network failure. This falls under the spectrum of border gateway protocol. This is not something that I need to deal with, and it sure as hell is not something that any game dev needs to deal with. Border gateway protocol is a routing protocol that decides how the entire world's internet traffic flows and moves around. It is not something that they will ever have to consider when creating their netcode. And I'm sorry that I got a little heated, but the entire thing that I'm pissed off about is this is the communication that we get. We don't get actual development updates. We get jackasses that have no right being in the position that they're in, talking out of their ass about things they don't understand or just flat out lying to their own community. Yeah, from a community management standpoint, 10 Chambers has historically done an extremely poor job, and they continue to do an extremely poor job at managing their community. And I can sit here for another 30, 40 minutes and just ramble on about all of the community mistreating and all the wrongdoings they've ever done, but I think I've made my points clear enough. And unfortunately, from a game management and development perspective, this game is still extremely poorly managed, and it does not get much better. So this next part's going to be very slow burn. I'm going to have to do a lot of build up and setup before I can actually talk about what I'm going to talk about, so just bear with me for a second. On that note, we're going to start with this Steam thread on the Steam forums. And for brevity's sake, I'm just going to be going over Callie's responses and then responding to him, but I will leave the actual full thread in the description if you want to read over it yourself. So Callie says that content is going to continue to be delivered the exact same way as it has been for the previous 6 rundowns, and he goes on to say that the studio originally consisted of 9 people, where only 7 of them were actually hands-on developing the game, so they created a cost-efficient way in order to create content for the game. So for those of you who don't know how things like levels in this game are created, they're put through an algorithm and are randomly generated. It's why they work off of a tile set system, because they can define what a room actually is, and then just send it off into a random system to go and construct a level from nothing. So someone from the modding Discord made a website which allows you to fill in all the criteria needed to create your own level from the algorithm. And you can change a whole bunch of stuff from the height of the zone, what tile set you want to use, how many zones it should branch off into, the direction that it should branch off into the zones. You can say how many resources you want in the zone, whether it's a respawn room or not, a whole bunch of stuff. And while this is all well and good, the problem is that you don't really have that much control over what the actual layout of the level is and how you want the level to actually flow and play. So when you have things that you would like to fine-tune, like the lighting on the level, layout within a room, how you want an actual room to look, the orientation of a room, maybe you say you don't want this room off to the right, you want that to be replaced with something else, you don't have control over any of that. If you want to change all of it, you have to completely regenerate the entire level, which gives it a new level seed, which means maybe things that you wanted to stay and things that you were fine with will go away. I'm not criticizing this development framework. This is fine. There's a bunch of games that use tile systems and things to randomly generate levels. Destiny uses a tile-esque system. They'll take blocks of a level and define it as a tile, and they'll just copy and paste it around. It makes creating levels a lot easier, and it saves on dev time and resources. I'm not trying to sit here and argue that this is a bad framework. By no means am I doing that. What I am saying, though, is that their mere use of this framework for what they're attempting to do with the game currently is just stupid. They're trying to handcraft and fine-tune every single level to be its own unique experience, but they're still using this framework that forces them to randomly generate every single level. So if they want to change how a room looks or how a zone functions, they can't, because they'd have to reseed the entire level and change everything regarding it. But I wish that I was joking about some of this stuff. They literally can't add a light to a room or change the orientation of a room. Maybe they want this one door to be on the south side instead of the north. They literally don't have control over any of that. That's just all part of the random generation. And they don't have any way to change or fine-tune specific aspects like that. And again, this isn't necessarily a bad thing. There's a lot of roguelike games that do the same thing with tile systems. But the problem is that GTFO takes 7 months to give us 10 levels, and most of them don't even contain new tiles. And it begs the question of what the hell is going on if it takes them 7 months to make the new levels. Because Callie and Doc love to go on about, oh, the level design team is working their best, and it's like, I don't believe the level design team works very hard at all, because they don't have to by nature of the system that they have created. The only hard work they would have to do is just hit the random button over and over until they get something that they want. And if the level design team is also the group of people that makes the new tiles, does it really take 7 months to create 4 or 5 tiles for, Alpha 0 or Alpha 1, whatever the hell they want to call the other dimension? Does it really take 7 months to make like 4 tiles for that? And a lot of the stuff that the tiles are made out of within itself is already reused. A lot of the ambient machinery and just shelving and all the other shit that's just lying around is just copy and pasted multiple times throughout the same tile sometimes. Like, a lot of it, I assume, would just be spending time in the Unity sculpting tool for terrain, and then I don't even know what past that. And I understand that, like, they have a bunch of different systems that all need to be functional and ready to go before they can release the next batch of content that they want to make. But my question is, like, if you're getting bottlenecked on something, like, let's say the enemy design team is having, issues getting an enemy to work the exact way that they want it to, how hard is it to just release an intermediary rundown or just have another extension of levels in the meantime? They literally have a system in place to do this, to randomly generate content, to create levels in a snap, just that fast. And it's not like it can't be done. You have modders like Project Zero, who's an absolute fucking maniac, and released a rundown in like 3 months that has like over 20 unique enemies, like 15 something unique guns. And then he has his own custom tiles in it as well, on top of having like 20 or more levels. And he does that by himself in 3 months. How the hell is it that a development team of 50 people can do a quarter of that in 7? And again, if they're getting bottlenecked on something, where is all that development time for the other systems going? Because I don't see it. I don't see where it's all gone. The difference between Rundown 4 and Rundown 5 was, again, like 7 or almost 8 months. We got a new tile set. Great, an entire new tile set. I can see where the level design team put all their time into. But we got a Charger Scout and then respawn rooms. The respawn rooms are horribly implemented, which I've gone over in my Rundown 5 review, and I'm not even kidding. I wish I was exaggerating, but I quite literally am not. The Charger Scout takes 30 seconds to create that enemy because everything that they have, all of their gameplay systems are super modular. I mean, I'm not even joking. To create the Charger Scout, all they did was take the model for a charger, use a pre-built scaling that they have within their own code to increase the size of its head, and then apply the Scout AI to it so it got feelers. That was it. Like, they did not put any effort into it. It was snap. 30 seconds, enemy created, good enough. It just makes me wonder what the hell they're actually doing during these 7-month downtimes when nothing is happening. We're not getting new enemies. We're hardly getting new tiles. We're not getting gameplay updates. You want to talk about actual legitimate gameplay updates? Stealth has been the exact same since this game's inception. Alarm scans have been the exact same since this game's inception. We have a few new types of alarm scans, being like surges and S1s and clusters, but you want to know what else is crazy? That same Project Zero guy that I mentioned earlier, I forgot to mention earlier, that he also has dozens of new scan types within his rundown that he made in 3 months. And they include things like flash scans, or team scans that complete instantly if the entire team steps in them, which encourages more team coordination. They have things like duo scans, which go faster if you have 2 people in them. I don't remember the name of it, but there's certain scans that go backwards if you have too many players in them. They have scans that only count up if you have 1 player in them. He took the time to create somewhat interesting scan types to make scans just less boring, of just, I stand in the circle and the one dude goes to the funnel spot and shoots in a straight line. I mean, I'm not even exaggerating. That's nearly half the reason why S1 scans exist in the first place, is because people just kept kiting and just sending one person off to kill the entire alarm wave while everyone else just ran around mindlessly standing in a circle. Like, we're going to talk about gameplay updates. Like, we have no new enemies in stealth. I'm not joking. Stealth has not changed since this game's inception. I think the only actual change that stealth has got is just there's a lot more scouts now because people aren't as afraid of them as they were in Rundown 1. But we've gotten no new stealth enemies. We've gotten no updates to how enemies function in stealth. We've gotten no updates to how aggro mechanics work. We've got no updates to how pulling rooms work. None of the underlying systems that involve anything regarding stealth have gotten any changes, barring B-Hop being removed. But that was mostly an exploit anyways, so I'm not really going to count that. And for loud alarm scans, nothing else has changed there either. Pretty much every single alarm in the game is either you use sentries and you funnel it, or you close the door and you permafoam it. There's no variation. We also haven't gotten any new kinds of objectives. We've gotten a modification of an uplink terminal, which is a good step in the right direction, but much like everything else 10 Chambers does, they don't capitalize on it. They don't keep pushing it forward. They just do one thing and say, that's enough. Going back to Project Zero again, he has enemies that only wake up if you shoot or if the room itself wakes up and screams. They don't wake up from enemies dying. They don't wake up from you moving. Like, I think that's a great concept for an enemy. And if you look far enough, you probably could find someone suggesting something similar to it in game suggestions. But as I showed previously, 10 Chambers doesn't give a fuck about game suggestions. They don't look in that channel. Despite what they will say, they do not. But anyways, all of that is just an extremely long-winded explanation to say that it is really, really damning when Callie outright just says that they have extremely cost-effective ways of producing content for the game. Because, yeah, you're right, you do. But where the hell is all of that time going, and all of that time and costs that was saved by using these development frameworks? Where is it going? What is happening with all of it? And aside from that, there's this other huge issue where Callie fundamentally just does not understand what the community wants. When he says from a player's perspective, I have a hard time understanding how taking a pause from the game between content drops is a bad thing. He's just not understanding. There is no problem with taking breaks. There's not a problem with encouraging your players to take breaks. RuneScape does that constantly. It's a game that I adore. But I take regular breaks from RuneScape. It's a regular thing to happen. The problem lies in the fact that you offer no avenue for people that want to play more of your game the option to do that. Like, once you finish the rundown in GTFO, there's nothing to do. And you can say that for a lot of games, like, oh, once you finish the game, you have nothing to do. But that's just intrinsically not true. It's why games have things like New Game Plus. It's why games have achievements. It's why games have collectibles. It's why they have multiple and expansive class selection. You take a game like Divinity Original Sin 2. That is quite literally my favorite game of all time. I've beaten it like 7 or 8 times. Every single playthrough has been different because the game has such a wide avenue of things for you to explore and do. But GTFO doesn't have any of that because it's just entirely linear. And you take a game like Dark Souls or Elden Ring. Those games are also pretty linear. Elden Ring less so, but definitely with Dark Souls. Those games are very linear, what you can and cannot do. But even then, those games are still fun to play multiple times over because they offer things like New Game Plus. The enemies get harder. Your gear gets slightly stronger. You will find new things that you cannot find outside of New Game Plus. You have more things that you can do and more to explore even after you have beaten the game. Callie says that saying most people are done with the content after 2 weeks isn't true, and people need a couple of months to have time to clear a rundown. Well, yeah, that's right. Most people will need 2 or 3 months to clear a rundown. But especially when you dumb down the entire game for Rundown 6 to make everything easier across the board, people are clearing it in a month and a half tops. So when you have these people that play your game and they love the game and they want to play more of it, and you just don't give them the option to do that, yes, people would like to see something like a pseudo New Game Plus, something like Risk of Rain has with Eclipse, where as you beat the game, you get increasingly negative modifiers added to your runs. Like, I wouldn't be completely opposed to seeing that in GTFO. And you can make the argument that, well, it doesn't fit the lore of the game, and I'm sure 10 Chambers will try and make that argument too. But, cosmetics definitely don't make any fucking sense. It's like, hey, here's a bunch of prisoners selected by the warden to be completely and utterly disposable. He does not care about them at all. oh, but we're going to give you cosmetics. The warden's going to allow you to have cosmetics because you've done such a good job. Keep up the work, kiddo. You know, for people that want to focus so intently on lore this rundown, they've really done a very shitty job at explaining that one. But he says the way the content is delivered is a choice, and it's not one that's made to have the maximum retention of players. I don't think any game should be designed to have maximum retention of players, because then you just have gotcha games where people have the sunk cost fallacy, where they've played it too much to be able to quit. I don't want that in any game. But what I do want is something to do once you've completed the main batch of content. And it doesn't need to be something as elaborate as Risk of Rain's Eclipse. It could be simply complete a level with this loadout. Or it could be something like you beat the game on harder mode, where now boosters and checkpoints are completely disabled, and if you wipe, you have to restart from A1. Like, people will play that. I guarantee it. But the last part of his last statement is what I think is the most damning and the worst thing that really just shows how clueless Callie is to just how bad things really are and how little he understands the community's wants. When he says that it didn't cater to 100% of the most veteran players' lust for challenge, that's not what the problem is. Sure, everyone wants this game to be more challenging. It's advertised as such, and once you understand the mechanics, there's very little challenge in this game to begin with. But that's not what the problem is, dude. I think a lot of Callie's reasoning behind this statement has to do with checkpoints and the fact that there's a lot of veteran players that do not like checkpoints. And the devs want to sit on their high horse and just say like, oh, well, you're gatekeeping and you're an elitist and you're bad for the community and blah, 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 blah. They can say whatever word of the day they want to throw at you. But it does not stop the main fact that it feels, to us at least, that it is destroying the integrity of the game. And this whole argument that everybody likes to bring up where it's like, well, if you don't like it, don't use it, is just completely asinine because it doesn't stop the problem. It's like the same thing as saying if they added a mode where everybody got unlimited health and unlimited ammo, and they beat the game that way, it's like, well, if you don't like it, don't use it. It's like that the game isn't designed to have that. I'm pretty sure the devs would have a very clear problem with that kind of thing even existing in the first place. And I personally don't care about checkpoints. My only problems with them have nothing to do with the fact that they exist, and more so to do with the fact that there is nothing to gain from not using them, and also, much like everything else in this game, they're buggy as fuck and do not release in a proper usable state. We'll take an example of a very recent game that has pretty much done the same thing. We'll take Elden Ring. The game has tons of new accessibility features to allow people to still beat the game. You know, you now have access to Ashes of War, so you can put a special weapon ability on whatever weapon you want. You have a summon that you can use to fight bosses with. But the thing that Elden Ring does correctly, that GTFO doesn't, is they offer optional pieces of content that reward you with unique rewards that you cannot get without fighting specific bosses without the summons. There are things called Everjails, and in these Everjails, it's just a boss fight. But you can't use the summon in the boss fight, which means you have to learn the boss, you have to improve, and you're rewarded for doing so. GTFO offers no such thing. If you beat a level with a checkpoint compared to a not beating it with a checkpoint, the results are the same. You know, the devs tried to focus so intensely hard on providing an immersive experience for this game, but there is nothing more immersion breaking than setting off one scout and hearing two people that you're playing with say, oh yeah, let's just wipe. I'm not here to play Destiny raids. I'm not here to cheese everything and then wipe the minute something fractionally goes wrong. You know, there is no incentive for trying to save a run anymore. If you fuck up a room and you spend a ton of ammo, you just kill yourself and restart from a checkpoint so you keep the ammo, and then you memorize the enemy spawn position so you can go through it without any problems. It encourages this stupid, unfun, degenerative playstyle where you don't need to improve, you don't need to learn from your mistakes, you just need to memorize your specific level seed, and you can get through it that way. But the devs aren't thinking about this, they're not considering this, and anytime someone brings it up, you're just labeled as a gatekeeping elitist, and you are completely and utterly ignored. So I have a clip to show, because the person in this clip says what I want to say far, far better than I ever could, and for context, he is talking about people who cheat in player versus environment games, or PvE games. And while I understand that using checkpoints is nowhere near equivalent to cheating, the reasoning behind these sentiments is still completely applicable.
The biggest and most pressing issue being the devaluation of accomplishments within the game. And as mentioned, the validity of this notion has varying weight to it. No one has an issue with Little Billy using speed hacks in Mario Kart, but throw that kid into a speedrunning environment and Carl Jobst wouldn't have to worry about rent that month. The game itself may not have changed, but the expectations surrounding it justifiably have. Devaluing a game's integrity doesn't have any long-lasting ramifications if done in the void where no one's affected, but introduce other players into the mix, and now the choices you make actually have some baggage to them. This is why MVM cheaters who say, "What's the big deal? We're not hurting anybody," are wrong. Sure, you didn't explicitly harm another player to get your fun, but you did indirectly devalue the status of achieving those feats of victory. You could say, it's MVM, who gives a shit, but a lot of people do. Every wave accomplished, every mission box ticked, every tour completed, every Australium drop you witness, it's a symbol of effort. It's why people make leaderboards for tour counts or track their Australiums on their profiles. Even I do this. When a metric is given added importance, and that number can be artificially inflated by unfair means, it devalues its legitimacy as a whole.
Because it shows some really good points in regards to checkpoints and some of the systematic issues that GTFO has that Callie and the other members of the development team just fundamentally do not understand. By putting this in the description of your store page, by saying, "Be warned, GTFO is not your typical run and gun shooter, it's for players that value a serious challenge." By putting that on the store page for your game, you are making a direct statement that not only is this game not for every player, right? There's going to be people that don't want to play this kind of game, but not only by putting that there are you saying that, you're also making a direct statement that not every player is going to be able to beat this game. And because of these statements, there is an inherent and an intrinsic amount of prestige that comes with every single accomplishment that you achieve within this game. And it's just like the clip says, at least in regards to checkpoints, the game itself may not have changed, but the expectations surrounding it have. By adding checkpoints, you are devaluing every single accomplishment in the game as a whole by making it just inherently easier to accomplish. Every room stealth cleared, every alarm survived, every objective completed, every cosmetic unlocked. These are all symbols of someone's effort and accomplishments within the game. By adding superficial means for people to get these same accomplishments, people that don't need to learn the game, people that don't need to improve, people that don't need to get better in order to achieve the same things, you are inherently reducing the value of every single accomplishment in-game. And the reason why I say superficial is because for every single person that will improve and will learn using checkpoints and say, what can I do differently? How did I fail here? There's going to be another person which is going to do the complete opposite. They're just going to say, where do the enemies spawn? Where do the resources spawn? How can I brute force this? How can I just memorize the one specific level seed I'm playing with and then never touch it again? And because of that, because you don't have anything such as, like, you can only use a checkpoint X number of times before it kicks you to lobby anyways, you are devaluing every single in-game accomplishment for everybody. And there are definitely ways for 10 Chambers to implement checkpoints into the game and keep them in a way that they don't feel superficial. But they're just not doing that. And I'm not trying to sit here and say that I don't want more people clearing the rundown. I literally made an entire YouTube channel on this game based around creating guides and other videos to help people clear the rundown. Like, it's not that I don't want people to finish the game, it's that I want more people to finish the game in a less superficial way, in a way where you are required to learn the game, where you are required to get better, where you are required to improve and not beat your face against the wall until you get a favorable outcome. And I'm not just trying to rag and hate on new players. I do the exact same thing to veterans. It's why I'm so avid against kiting, because kiting is the exact same thing. You get to completely bypass game mechanics and beat levels without learning the level, without trying to improve, without getting better. You just kite and beat the level through a superficial mean. And the whole reason I'm saying any of this is because the main draw to GTFO is the accomplishment from beating a level. It's the feeling of accomplishment that you did something. And they can add, boosters, and they can add cosmetics now, but cosmetics are really just a way to show that you have accomplished something. They're not going to keep anybody playing just because, oh, I got a new cosmetic, I gotta play the game more. The main appeal to the game is literally the sense of accomplishment. We don't have level ups, we don't have unlocks. That's not what the game is for. And at the end of the day, you can argue semantics about all of this and say, well, it's personal accomplishment, and all that doesn't matter because it comes back to the fundamental point of it's about the integrity of the game and it's about what you are doing. Kiting wasn't good for the game. You didn't see anybody running around and just saying, oh, well, if you don't like kiting, then don't kite. Because kiting wasn't good for the game's integrity. The current state of checkpoints aren't good for the game's integrity. There are ways that they can make them good, and there are ways that they can completely rework them. But again, they haven't done that, and I don't think they're going to. And now that they've opened Pandora's box by adding cosmetics that are specifically unlocked by doing specific things, if I clear the entire rundown without using a checkpoint, I feel like the accomplishment that I have isn't valued as much as the same person that completed the rundown by using checkpoints. I've done something objectively more challenging, and I don't feel rewarded for it. I don't personally care about that one as much. It's more of like a smaller thing, but it's just something to note. It's just food for thought. They have opened Pandora's box with cosmetics now, and it's just going to be interesting to see what happens from there. And in that same vein, people like to take pride in things that they've done, and they like to show it to other people, not merely as a way to just flex on them and say like, oh, I've done this and you haven't, so I'm better than you. It's just, I've put this much time in and I'm committed to this and I enjoy this and I want other people to know that. It's the reason why games have mastery systems for characters, where you can say, I've acquired mastery whatever on this character. Why games will have title systems, where you can equip a title that says, I've killed this enemy, or I've done such and such to unlock this title. So in light of this, going all the way back to what Callie said earlier about players not feeling like they're valued, this is why. The only accomplishment that really exists in the game is clearing a rundown. But because of checkpoints, you have inherently devalued this accomplishment for every single player. And this isn't a problem for tons of other games because they just shift the goalpost and add something else for people to do. But you guys don't do that. We don't have challenges. We don't have achievements. We don't have hard modes for levels. We don't have anything to gain from not using checkpoints. We don't have extra skin unlocks. We don't have titles. We don't have anything. And all of this was once again just a really, really long-winded way to say that this is why myself and many, many other players are getting really fed up with 10 Chambers, because they just don't understand the problem. And it's more so that it's not that they don't understand it, it's that they are willfully ignorant of the problem. They pretty much just ignore any and all criticism that speak out against checkpoints or against stamina because they just think these people are gatekeeping elitists even when their criticisms are completely valid. More challenges and difficulty in this game isn't the only thing that they can do to increase the amount of content and things for players to do. It's just the most natural progression path given the intrinsic prestige that this game tries to sell itself with. But all of this wraps into my original point that I made at the beginning of the video when I said that they have no sense of direction in terms of player retention. You can add checkpoints, and you can add boosters, and you can add cosmetics, all that you want. But those aren't going to keep people playing outside of some scenarios with checkpoints, because if they don't like the difficulty, if they don't like the pacing, if they don't like the theme of the game, they're just not going to play it. And like they self-admit on their store page, this isn't a run and gun FPS. It's not like Destiny. You can't just hop on the game, have fresh install, and just jump into a strike and start playing the game. It's a hardcore game by nature. If people don't like that, no amount of casual features you can add will fix it. And for your veteran players, when you add things like checkpoints that are flawed, that we have problems with, and you just ignore us and then you call us elitist for bringing up valid criticism, it doesn't make us want to play the game. When you add systems like stamina, which are inherently designed around the veteran player base to nerf specific playstyles, and you don't listen to the people that the system is designed around in terms of balance, it doesn't make us want to play the game. This game will always be a niche game. It'll never have a huge follower and player base just because of its gameplay loop and how it's intrinsically hardcore. But at the end of the day, the least 10 Chambers can do is find a different approach strategy for attracting new players to the game that doesn't completely piss off the other half of your community. In terms of other gameplay features and balancing, they do a poor job at that. Stamina is a really, really big offender of this. Stamina is a system that is fundamentally designed around the veteran player base, so they would stop abusing a broken mechanic. But the problem lies in the fact that 10 Chambers themselves do not even understand what the broken mechanic is, and do not know how to even go about fixing it. It's why you hear a bunch of veteran players complaining about stamina, because it just sucks to play with. It doesn't solve the problem, and all it does is cause an annoyance for everybody else that doesn't abuse these broken mechanics that cause kiting to work. And the whole reason behind this is because 10 Chambers is under the misconception that kiting is just about running in a straight line and running a circle around enemies. But that's not all there is. That's not what makes it work. Circle kiting works because it allows you to leave the enemy's attack radius before their attack finishes, which causes the attack to just flat out miss. So 10 Chambers' solution to this was to punish every single player, regardless if they were participating in this broken mechanic or not, by reducing all movement speed for all players across the board. Long kiting works because it's never been about running in a straight line. It's always been about getting to the next door or the next part of the map you can jump off of to cause the enemies to reroute and go a different direction. If you close a door on the enemies, they have to take the shortest path into the room, and they will account for doors being open or closed. So if I leave one door open and close another, well, it's faster to just run around technically from what the enemies think, so they do that instead. When they finally go all the way around, then I just open the door and then run away. And now they've wasted a bunch of time and they're behind me. But the devs don't think about this because they just think kiting is running in a straight line and just running a circle around the enemies. While both these things are true to some extent, they're not why the mechanics work. And when you try to make a system balanced around fixing a mechanic that people are abusing, but you fundamentally lack the understanding of the reason why the mechanic even works in the first place, you create a system that benefits nobody and pisses off numerous people. Circle kiting can be very easily fixed by using the already modular system that the devs have for creating all the content in the game. There are two things that help dictate how fast an enemy moves and how fast their tongue attacks go through. This is the global animation speed multiplier and the size range. The larger an enemy is, the slower all of their things are. The higher their global animation speed multiplier, the faster they move and do different actions. This is why shadows attack slower. It's because their multiplier is 0.8 instead of 1.0. That being said, it really isn't hard and doesn't take very much development time at all to devise a rage mechanic system where if an enemy misses an attack, they get like 5 or 6, maybe 10%, something like that, increased global animation speed multiplier until they hit an attack or until they take damage. This would be really, really easy to implement and would just fix circle kiting because after you dodge like 2 tongues, while a lot of the enemies have lower cooldowns and they just attack fast enough to hit you anyways. And this doesn't punish people for not abusing the mechanic because if you damage them or if they hit you, then the entire rage thing is completely nullified. If you get hit by an enemy and you're trying to run from them, you're not going to keep getting this rage mechanic stacked because they hit it and it resets. If I'm getting swarmed and I just start spraying into the horde and something misses, it doesn't matter. I shot them. The rage mechanic resets. It's a very easy way to just fix a broken system. To fix long kiting, they just need to increase the amount of stamina that you have and decrease the recharge speed by very significant amounts. This way you have a bank of stamina to draw from. I talked about this ad nauseum in my R5 review, and my thoughts are still completely unchanged about long kiting. The current iteration of stamina does nothing to fix it, and there's no better showcase of this than the R6D4 solo when they kite the surge alarm. As I said earlier, kiting is not about running in a straight line, so when I can get behind a door and it only takes 7.5 seconds to get a full stamina bar from literally 0%, all I have to do is get behind one door on the map and close it, and suddenly I have my full stamina back. But don't listen to the veteran players that play your game. Don't listen to the people in Bug Hunt during testing for stamina telling you that this will not work. Don't listen to any of the criticism that is completely valid directed towards stamina because we just want kiting to be back. We don't like change. We don't want the game to change at all. We want it to be the same forever. What we want is the devs to take the time to create a system that isn't just inherently flawed from the get-go. It's just a broken system, and it doesn't fix the problem, and it just makes it more annoying for everybody else to play the game. And this isn't even talking about all the things it does to Melee, because Melee is completely trashed in R6. Even from the perspective of stealth, everything's been flipped on its head and it doesn't make any goddamn sense. The devs say, alright, we're going to take out B-Hop and make it so Hammer cannot one-shot small enemies to the occiput because we want stealth to be slower, we don't want people steamrolling through stealth all the time. So in that same vein, we're going to make the Hammer stagger multiplier 5 times, and then we're also going to make it so it charges twice as fast as it did before. So now, great, people are still steamrolling through stealth, and now giants are no longer a threat because the Hammer doesn't even need to full charge to a limb to stagger them, and it charges twice as fast, and you can just solo a giant without any problems. And then for loud sections, they make it so you completely gimp yourself because in order to not get fucked over by the stamina system, you have to run the knife. But the knife has no range and feels completely awful to use because of its janky hitbox. Overall, the devs have just completely destroyed all movement in this game, and that is not a good idea, because there is nothing that will infuriate people more than movement mechanics. And I understand they don't want this to be a run-and-gun FPS game, but there's a difference between a run-and-gun FPS game and a, oh shit, there's 30 things in front of me, let me run away kind of game. People do not like having their movement restricted in any game, and sometimes people like the movement mechanics so much that even when they're bugs, like things like the sliding to go faster kind of thing that this game had, they get to stay in the game as features, and sometimes other games will adopt them as features themselves. You look at something like rocket jumping. That is a bug that goes all the way back to the era of Quake and arena shooters. But now that's just a main staple in games like Team Fortress 2 and Titanfall 2, and it's even made its way into Overwatch to some degree. It's why the PvP meta in games like Destiny are completely based around movement exotics and movement armor pieces, because the movement is such a huge system in that game. It's why everybody got super pissed off at Stasis when it got released, because it was unfun to play against. You get frozen and you cannot move, and it completely destroys the entire movement aspect of the game. People like movement mechanics in games, so when you create a system that completely destroys the movement mechanics of GTFO, and then it doesn't even solve the problems it set out to fix, it is inherently a bad system. It's also especially a bad system when the game it's in has no form of combat mechanics. I know a lot of these things wouldn't fit in GTFO, like Destiny has shield types, and you can match damage types to deal bonus damage to that type of shield. Some games have things like burn cards, like what Titanfall 1 had. Some games have, like Deep Rock, have perks that you can equip. These are all things that help add to the combat system and to the combat mechanics. I know these things wouldn't necessarily fit GTFO, but when they put no effort into creating any kind of diverse combat mechanics, besides melee, and then completely kill melee and the movement, what are you left with other than a completely stale shooter? People already have a problem with hell weapons in this game because the enemy AI is awful. They literally run in a completely straight line towards you, and if you have a hell gun, you can solo hold the entire alarm wave. You don't need anybody else to shoot with you. A lot of this game's combat mechanics boil down to stand in the circle, and when enemies show up, you go to the funnel spot. And that's it. There's no diverse combat mechanics. Every encounter is played out pretty much the exact same with the exception of tanks and mothers. So when they buff every single gun in the game, then they remove melee play and then massively increase the amount of ammo and tool packs that you have in every single level, the game just becomes extraordinarily stale because every single encounter is the exact same. You don't have to watch your positioning. You don't have to move around and try and hit the enemies in the back or occiput them or do anything like that like you would have to do with melee to be effective. There's no skill ceiling to any of the gunplay because all of it just boils down to stand in one spot and shoot in a straight line. Reactors are a horrible example of this. R5 is a great example of how boring reactor sequences can be. Both of the reactors, being R5B1 and R5C2, were just extremely boring to play because you just took a hell weapon, stood in one spot, and fired in a straight line until the wave was done. Other games can get away with having somewhat boring gunplay mechanics because they have some other kind of secondary combat mechanic to supplement it, but GTFO has completely removed that. The other thing is that GTFO's weapons don't feel all that great to shoot because of the god-awful recoil change that they did at the start of R6, and also because a lot of the weapon animations are just boring. But they can't make any interesting weapon animations because, much like everything else, their system for creating guns and animations is completely modular. They tie an animation to a specific part of a gun, and when they're creating a gun, they just copy and paste a bunch of parts together till they have the gun completed, what they want it to look like. So if they want to make a custom animation for a gun, they can't, because they'd have to completely remake the entire weapon and the entire system they have for assigning animations to stuff. And this ties back into what I was talking about like 15 or 20 minutes ago almost at this point, where the fact that they don't put a ton of effort into content and gameplay updates, because nothing has changed. And the things that are really easy for them to make and that shouldn't take much time at all by the very virtue of the system that they have created, they just don't make. It's not hard for them to make guns, so why are we not getting guns each rundown? Even if they don't have to make custom parts for them, why do we not just have a new type of gun? It's not hard for them to make levels, so why aren't we getting more levels each rundown? Speaking of things that we're not getting more of, this leads straight into bug fixing for this game, because much like a lot of the content updates, they don't put much effort into bug fixing either. This is a quality of life and bug fix mod made by a dude named Peels, and there's a lot of things in here that either aren't in the game, that should be, or bugs that he fixes himself that the devs still haven't fixed to this day. And this was made all the way back in R4, and he made this with the help of like 2 or 3 other people. It includes things like fixing reload animations from playing when you swap weapons, cells getting glitched on top of each other, not being able to pick them up, being able to ping resources when they're inside of lockers, being able to properly limit your frame rate. It deals with the weird jank when you're trying to revive someone and the revive resets. He fixed the bio-tracker pings remaining on the screen by himself. There's a whole bunch of things, like even the scout sound bug is in here. There's a whole bunch of things that he fixed with maybe the help of 2 or 3 other people that the devs took 4 or 5 rundowns to fix, and in some cases still haven't fixed to this day. There's even a case where he fixes a bug with pinging resources that have already been picked up that the devs attempted to fix in R6, but much like other stuff, they didn't end up actually bug testing it, because if you pick up the resource and you put it in a different zone, it doesn't update what zone it's in, it doesn't update what room it's in. If I pick it up in zone 12, room A, and I move and I put it down in room like B of zone 14, and I try and ping it on the terminal, the ping will go to zone 14, but it'll still say on the terminal that it's in room 12A. And when I said at the beginning of the video that the devs don't put much effort into fixing bugs, it's stuff like this is what I'm talking about. Callie also ended up doing a Q&A with some of the people on the modding server at some point, and despite how much I would really, really like to show the clip here, the clips that I want to show, I'm going to have to timestamp them in the description. You're going to have to look at them yourself, because the audio balancing on that video is so completely fucked that I can't make it sound good without blowing out your eardrums or without making you able to hear what the people are saying. So I'll include it and timestamp it in the description. I'm just going to paraphrase from what they say. They talk about various different things, such as the root cause for what Sniper Melee is and why it exists in the first place, to a future bug the devs are going to have involving bots trying to equip weapons that are disabled or don't exist. And then they even go so far as to talk about a mechanic called heat, which dictates how enemies spawn during alarm waves, and how the entire system is just broken and doesn't even work. You know, they bring up an example where they say that Shadow Giant should be able to spawn on R6D3, but they just can't because the heat system doesn't work properly. And they even say that they can tell them exactly what line of code it's broken on. And the last thing that they talk about has to do with the fact that the level generation sometimes uses the wrong seed. It uses the seed for the build number and not the level generation seed. So basically what this means is that for any version of the game, you'll get roughly the same level seed when it comes to things like where specific objective items are supposed to spawn. And it doesn't really seem like the devs are very competent, for lack of a better word, with what they're doing in regards to bug fixes, when they can't release systems like bots or checkpoints on time when given 7 months to make them and a team of 50 people without being massively bugged to hell. And then they can't even fix things that have been broken for an insanely long time, such as heat level build seed stuff, without modders deliberately telling them that it's broken. Why do modders that have very limited access to the code know the code better than the people that develop the game and can make changes faster than the people that develop the game? This isn't even talking about previous things, like how back damage was bugged for 2 months and didn't work unless enemies were facing a specific direction. Like, modders knew how to fix this long before the devs implemented it, and it was like a 5-minute fix. It was literally just an error with how the math equation was written for, like, where it checks the player's position versus the enemy's position and rotation to apply back damage. But, you know, when the devs can't get things like checkpoints working in a reasonable amount of time, and when they don't even put in the time to test their own bugs, such as things like Sniper Melee, and how the checkpoint fix for C3 that made it to stop spawning double enemy waves didn't actually just stop it from spawning double enemy waves, it just stopped it from spawning enemy waves, period. You know, like, these things aren't hard to test, they're not hard to notice. It's not hard to notice when you restart from a checkpoint and suddenly there's no enemy waves. It's not hard to notice when you implement a netcode change and then suddenly enemies are 2 seconds behind where they're supposed to be. You know, why are modders telling you how to fix your bugs, and why are you not able to notice them ahead of time? I have one running theory for why they can't notice them, because 1, the devs don't really play their own game, and 2, they kicked pretty much everybody out of Bug Hunt at the start of R6. A lot of this is speculatory, and I don't want to fan the flames on shit like this, because there's not really any clear-cut answer, and because I had to sign an NDA, I can't really say a whole bunch anyways. But the only thing I will say is that one of the main proponents of why they kicked a bunch of people out of Bug Hunt is because people kept leaking stuff, so they pretty much just shortened the amount of people to just be people that they trusted. But clearly that didn't work, because here are the patch notes for R6.5 from Bug Hunt, so good luck trying to figure out which one of the people you trust leaked that one, Doc. You know, and sometimes they just adamantly refuse to fix bugs. Remember when I said a long time ago that I was going to talk about the dev blog about patching? Well, we're going to talk about it now. Callie says in this dev blog that they basically can't fix a ton of bugs during extension because they split the code bases for R6.5 and R7 very early on in the development cycle for Rundown 6. But the thing is, this dev blog is mainly directed towards Sniper Melee because I think that's the most complained about bug in this game's history, just like period, end of story. And they've never made a dev blog on anything regarding patching until now. Callie basically says that they can't fix Sniper Melee or other bugs because they split the code base for the game very early on in Rundown 6's development, so they have a different code base for Rundown 6 and for Rundown 7. This is fine. This makes sense. Many games do this. This is only logical. The problem is when you try to claim that you can't fix specific bugs such as Sniper Melee because you split the code base. It doesn't make any sense because the bug that Sniper Melee was a byproduct of something that you guys touched in the code after you already split the code base. This basically means one of two things. One, they're doing a complete restructure over certain parts of their netcode, and that is why it cannot be easily backported because those systematic changes to the netcode do not exist in the Rundown 6 code branch. Or, they're just lying and trying to buy time so they can actually have a fix for R7. And considering the precedent that they have set over the past few years, I'm pretty sure it's the latter. Yeah, so I'm going to start wrapping this up. I've been going on for over an hour now, and I still have a whole laundry list of things I can talk about, like how Seafoam still doesn't function properly because it falls to the map, or how sentries can't shoot chargers if their heads are blown off, and a whole number of other stupid things. But I'm pretty much done. I've said everything I wanted to say, and the fact that there's still more to talk about is concerning. Because at the end of the day, at its core, GTFO is a game with extremely solid fundamentals and good base mechanics, and has a strong foundation to build off of to create something truly interesting. But over the years, 10 Chambers have shown that they are both unwilling and incapable of building off of these base mechanics to create something that is truly interesting. Their contempt with leaving things the exact way that they are and ignoring any and all issues and criticism that people bring up against the game. They're a company that actively attempts to shut down and push away groups of passionate players who take their time to create unique and interesting experiences for people who love the game to explore. They're a company that fundamentally lacks understanding of what their own community's wishes are, and blatantly and completely ignores anybody who levels criticism towards their game. It is a group of game developers that have taken extreme thought and care into creating modular and cost-effective ways to generate content for the game, but still consistently underperform and underdeliver compared to a small ragtag team of modders that have limited access to the code of the game, who consistently generate orders of magnitude more content than the developers can. It is a company that is at best ignorant and at worst deceitful in terms of communicating with their own player base. It is a group that understands their own code less than a small group of players that only have limited access to it. It's a team that doesn't understand the in-game systems that they're attempting to balance, and they refuse to listen to those who know better. 10 Chambers is a company that is running fast in no direction. Whether it be from the long and expansive content routes that the game has, or their inability to fix bugs and balance the game accordingly, or its downright deceitful community interactions. It's no real mystery that the game has stayed the exact same even since the pre-alpha. And who knows, maybe Rundown 7 will make me eat my words, and I honestly hope that they do, but I'm not holding my breath. Because at the end of the day, whether it be from the gameplay issues or the community ones, nothing ever changes. And if I had to sum up this game in one sentence, it would be, it's always the same. Take care, everybody.